The scream caught her attention first, then the sickening sound of a fist meeting flesh. Eleanor Zimmerman pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of the general store, her hands trembling as she clutched the small bag of flour she had just purchased. The scream had come from somewhere down the alley, and every instinct told her to walk away, to mind her own business like she had learned to do over the past 23 years. But her feet would not move. It was May of 1878, and Oroville, California had seen better days. The gold rush had long since passed, leaving behind a collection of hardy souls and desperate wanderers who clung to the foothills like the scrub brush that dotted the landscape. Eleanor had arrived 6 months ago with her stepfather, a cruel man named Harold, who had made it clear from the moment he married her mother that Eleanor was nothing more than an inconvenience to be tolerated. Another scream pierced the afternoon air. Before she could stop herself, Eleanor moved toward the sound. Her worn boots scraped against the dusty ground as she peered around the corner of the building. What she saw made her stomach turn. A woman, perhaps 10 years older than Eleanor, was curled on the ground while a large man in a stained vest kicked at her ribs. The woman's face was already swelling, one eye nearly shut. "Please," the woman sobbed, "I will have the money tomorrow, I swear it." "You said that last week," the man snarled, drawing his boot back for another kick. Eleanor knew she should leave. She knew better than to insert herself into situations that did not concern her. Harold had taught her that lesson well enough, along with so many others. Keep your mouth shut, keep your eyes down. Do not draw attention. Do not expect kindness, because kindness was a luxury that girls like her did not deserve. But watching another woman suffer felt like watching herself from the outside. "Stop!" Eleanor heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. The man turned, his bloodshot eyes focusing on her with predatory interest. "What did you say, girl?" Eleanor's mouth went dry. She clutched the bag of flour tighter against her chest like a shield. "I said stop. Please." The man laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the buildings. "Well, well, looks like we have ourselves a little hero." He took a step toward Eleanor, abandoning his previous victim. "Maybe you want to pay her debts for her?" Eleanor took a step backward, then another. The man advanced, and she could smell the whiskey on him even from several feet away. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. "I did not think so," the man said, reaching for her arm. The shot rang out before his fingers made contact. Eleanor flinched, certain for a moment that she had been hit. But the man froze, his hand still extended, his face suddenly pale beneath the layer of grime and sunburn. Very slowly, he looked down at the ground where a bullet had torn through the earth mere inches from his boot. "Touch her, and the next one goes through your skull." The voice came from behind Eleanor, deep and steady, with an accent that suggested years spent in the wilderness rather than in towns. She turned, her breath catching in her throat at the sight of the man who had spoken. He stood at the mouth of the alley, a rifle held loosely in his hands with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against the fabric of his buckskin shirt. His hair hung past his shoulders in thick waves the color of dark honey, and a beard covered the lower half of his face. But it was his eyes that held Eleanor transfixed. They were a startling shade of blue-green, like the mountain lakes she had heard stories about but never seen, and they regarded the scene before him with a calm intensity that made the whiskey-soaked man shrink backward. "This is none of your concern, Quinn," the man said, but his bravado had evaporated like morning dew under the California sun. "When a man decides to beat on women in broad daylight, it becomes everyone's concern," the stranger said. He lowered the rifle slightly, but his finger remained near the trigger. "Get out of here, Morrison. Sleep off that whiskey before you do something you will regret." Morrison cast one more venomous look at the women, then spat on the ground and stalked away, his footsteps heavy with wounded pride. The stranger watched him go before turning his attention to Eleanor and the woman still lying on the ground. He propped his rifle against the wall and moved toward them with surprising grace for a man of his size. Eleanor noticed the way his muscles shifted beneath his shirt, the raw power contained in every movement. "Are you hurt?" he asked Eleanor first, those remarkable eyes searching her face with genuine concern. Eleanor shook her head, not trusting her voice. No man had ever asked her that question before, not her stepfather, certainly not any of the men she had encountered during her difficult life. The simple inquiry, delivered in that gentle tone, threatened to unravel something inside her that she had kept tightly wound for years. The stranger seemed to accept her silence and turned his attention to the injured woman. He knelt beside her with unexpected gentleness. "Can you stand, madam?" The woman nodded, wincing as she tried to push herself upright. The stranger offered his arm, supporting her weight as she struggled to her feet. Eleanor watched, fascinated despite herself, as this mountain of a man displayed a tenderness she had not known existed in the male species. "My name is Ezra Quinn," he said, speaking to both women now. "I have a camp about 2 miles north of town. You are both welcome there if you need a safe place for a spell." "I will be fine," the woman said quickly, though her split lip made the words difficult. "I have children at home. I need to get back to them." Ezra nodded. "Let me at least see you to the edge of town. Morrison might be waiting." The woman looked like she wanted to refuse, but common sense won out over pride. She accepted Ezra's arm again, and together they began to walk. Ezra glanced back at Eleanor. "You coming?" Eleanor hesitated, then followed. What else could she do? She had nowhere else to be except back at the miserable cabin she shared with Harold, and she was in no hurry to return there. They walked in silence through the dusty streets of Oroville. A few people glanced their way with curiosity, but no one interfered. Ezra's reputation apparently preceded him. When they reached the outskirts of town, the woman pulled away gently. "Thank you," she said to Ezra. "I truly am grateful." "Will you be safe?" Ezra asked. "If you need help getting away from Morrison or anyone else, there are people in town who will assist you." The woman smiled sadly. "Morrison was just collecting a debt for someone else. My troubles are my own making. But thank you for your kindness." She glanced at Eleanor. "And thank you for trying to help, miss. That took courage." Before Eleanor could respond, the woman was gone, walking down the rutted path toward whatever home awaited her. Ezra turned to Eleanor. "What about you? Do you have somewhere safe to go?" The question struck Eleanor as absurd. Somewhere safe? She had not felt safe since her mother died 2 years ago, leaving her at the mercy of Harold and his quick temper. But she could not say that to this stranger, no matter how kind his eyes seemed. I should get home," she said quietly, looking down at the bag of flour still clutched in her hands. "That was a brave thing you did back there," Ezra said. "Foolish maybe, but brave." Eleanor looked up at him, surprised. "I did not do anything. You were the one who stopped him. You spoke up first. That matters." He studied her for a long moment, and Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks under his scrutiny. "What is your name?" "Eleanor. Eleanor Zimmerman." "Well, Eleanor Zimmerman, if you ever need help, my camp is 2 miles north along the creek. Just follow the water upstream. Anyone in town can point you in the right direction." "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" The question escaped before Eleanor could stop it. Ezra's expression softened. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Eleanor, and because I know what it looks like when someone is afraid to go home." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She took a step backward, shaking her head. "I'm not afraid. I'm fine. Thank you for your help, Mr. Quinn, but I need to go." She turned and walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding and her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed. How dare he see through her so easily? How dare he offer kindness when she knew it could not be genuine? Men did not help without expecting something in return. That was a lesson she had learned well. The walk back to Harold's cabin took nearly an hour. It sat at the far end of town, isolated from the other homes by choice rather than necessity. Harold preferred privacy for his drinking and his rages. Eleanor's steps slowed as she approached, dreading what mood she might find him in. The door was open, and she could hear him moving around inside. She paused on the threshold, clutching the flower. "Where have you been?" Harold's voice was sharp with suspicion. He appeared in the doorway, his face already flushed with drink, though it was barely past noon. "I sent you for supplies 2 hours ago." There was a delay at the store, Eleanor lied smoothly. Years of practice had made her good at it. They had to bring up more flour from the storeroom. Harold's eyes narrowed. "Do not lie to me, girl. I can smell a lie on you like cheap perfume." Eleanor's stomach clenched. "I am not lying. Here is the flour you wanted." Harold snatched the bag from her hands, and for a moment Eleanor thought he might let it go. Then his hand shot out and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh hard enough to bruise. Listen to me, you worthless creature. You live under my roof because I am charitable enough to allow it. Your mother is dead, which means you are nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." Eleanor bit the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out as his grip tightened. She had learned not to show pain, not to give him the satisfaction. "Do you understand me?" he repeated, shaking her. "Yes," Eleanor whispered, "I understand." Harold released her with a disgusted sound and disappeared back into the cabin. Eleanor stood on the porch, rubbing her arm where red marks were already forming. She blinked back tears and took several deep breaths, willing herself to feel nothing. Numbness was safer than hope. Emptiness was easier than longing for something different. But as she finally stepped inside the cabin, she could not stop thinking about Ezra Quinn's eyes and the way he had asked if she was hurt, and the simple fact that a man had shown her kindness without expecting anything in return. It was dangerous, she told herself, dangerous to believe it was real, dangerous to want more of it. Yet, want it she did. The next 3 days passed in the usual tedious pattern. Eleanor cooked and cleaned, endured Harold's verbal abuse and occasional physical violence, and kept her head down. But her mind kept drifting north to a camp 2 miles away where a mountain man with kind eyes had offered her refuge. It was foolish to think about it, even more foolish to consider actually going there. But the bruises on her arm had darkened to ugly shades of purple and yellow, and Harold's temper seemed shorter than usual. He had lost money gambling, which always made him mean. On the 4th day, Eleanor made a decision. She waited until Harold left for town, then quickly gathered a few belongings into a small bundle. She had almost nothing to her name, just a few items of clothing and a photograph of her mother. Everything else she left behind without a second thought. Her hands shook as she closed the cabin door behind her. She had no plan beyond finding Ezra's camp and hoping his offer had been genuine. If it was not, if he turned her away or expected payment for his help, then she would figure something else out. Anything was better than staying with Harold. The walk north felt longer than 2 miles. Eleanor followed the creek like Ezra had instructed, her bundle clutched to her chest. The May sun beat down on her shoulders, and sweat soon dampened her dress. She passed no one on the trail, which was both a relief and a concern. What if she had misunderstood his directions? What if she was lost? Then she smelled smoke from a campfire. Eleanor's steps quickened. Through the trees ahead she could see a clearing. She approached cautiously, suddenly uncertain again. What if this was a mistake? What if she had completely misread Ezra's intentions? "Hello?" she called out, her voice small. Ezra emerged from a canvas tent she had not noticed at first. He was shirtless, and Eleanor immediately looked away, her face burning. But not before she had registered the sight of his broad chest and muscular arms, the evidence of a life spent in physical labor. "Eleanor?" His voice held surprise and concern. "Wait there just a moment." She heard rustling. Then he appeared again, now wearing a shirt, though it hung open. "I apologize. I was not expecting visitors. Are you all right?" Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but suddenly all the fear and exhaustion of the past days caught up with her. To her absolute horror, tears began streaming down her face. She tried to stop them, tried to pull herself together, but her body betrayed her with sobs she could not control. Ezra moved toward her carefully, as one might approach a frightened animal. "Hey now," he said softly. "You are safe here. Whatever happened, you are safe now." His kindness only made her cry harder. How could he be so gentle with someone he barely knew? How could his voice be so steady and reassuring when every other man in her life had taught her to expect nothing but cruelty? "I am sorry," she managed between sobs. "I am so sorry. I should not have come here. I will leave." "You will do no such thing," Ezra said firmly but kindly. "You came here because you needed help, and I meant what I said. You are welcome in my camp for as long as you need." He gestured toward a log near the fire. "Sit down before you fall down. When is the last time you ate?" Eleanor could not remember. Yesterday? The day before? Harold rarely provided food, and she had gotten used to going hungry. "I thought so," Ezra said, reading her silence correctly. He moved to the fire, where a pot was suspended over the flames. "I made stew this morning. It's nothing fancy, but it is hot, and there is plenty." Within minutes, he had placed a bowl in her hands along with a spoon. Eleanor stared at it, overwhelmed. When she did not immediately eat, Ezra crouched down in front of her. "Eleanor, look at me." She raised her eyes to his face. "Whatever you have been through, whatever you have been told about yourself, it is not true. You deserve to eat. You deserve to be treated with respect. You deserve kindness. Do you understand?" Eleanor shook her head. "You do not know anything about me. I know enough. I know you put yourself in danger to help a stranger. I know you have bruises on your arm that look like finger marks. I know you are terrified right now, but you still had the courage to come here. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Eleanor looked down at the stew, then slowly brought a spoonful to her lips. It was delicious, rich with meat and vegetables and herbs she could not name. She ate mechanically at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what it needed. Ezra watched her eat with satisfaction, then busied himself around the camp to give her privacy. Eleanor observed him between bites. His camp was well organized, the kind of setup that came from years of living outdoors. He had a canvas tent, a fire pit with cooking equipment, neat stacks of supplies covered with oilcloth, and several animal pelts stretched on frames to dry. "Are you a trapper?" she asked when she had finished eating. Ezra glanced over from where he was arranging firewood. "I do some trapping, yes. Also hunting and scouting work when people need guides through the mountains. I prefer the wilderness to towns, but I come to Oroville for supplies a few times a month." "Do you live alone?" "Most of the time. I have lived this way for about 8 years now, ever since I left Montana Territory." Eleanor wanted to ask why he had left Montana, what had brought him to California, if he ever got lonely. But those questions felt too personal, too intrusive for someone who was accepting his charity. As if reading her thoughts, Ezra returned to the fire and poured himself coffee from a battered pot. "You can ask me anything you want, Eleanor. I have nothing to hide." "Why are you being so kind to me?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "You do not know me. I cannot pay you. I have nothing to offer." Ezra was quiet for a moment, studying the coffee in his cup. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "My mother was a kind woman who married a hard man. My father was not violent, but he was cold. He never raised a hand to her, but he never raised his voice in laughter either. He never told her she was doing a good job or that he appreciated her. He just expected everything and gave nothing back." He looked up at Eleanor. "I watched my mother wither away under that coldness. She died when I was 17, and I think part of her death was just giving up. I swore then that I would never be like my father. I would never withhold kindness just because I could. I would never make someone feel small or worthless just because they needed help." Eleanor felt fresh tears threatening. "I'm sorry about your mother." "Thank you. The point is, I help because I can, because someone should, and because you deserve better than whatever you have been dealing with." He paused. "Was it your husband who gave you those bruises?" "My stepfather," Eleanor said quietly. "My mother died 2 years ago, and he made it clear I was not wanted, but I had nowhere else to go. You are here now. I cannot stay here indefinitely. People will talk. It would not be proper." Ezra raised an eyebrow. "Eleanor, I live in the woods. I'm not overly concerned with what is proper. But if you are worried about your reputation, there's a boarding house in town run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson. She's a good woman, and she hires help sometimes. I could introduce you." The offer was practical and sensible, but Eleanor felt an unexpected disappointment. Of course he did not want her staying at his camp. Why would he? She was a stranger and a burden. "That sounds reasonable," she made herself say. "Thank you." Ezra frowned. "Eleanor, I am not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to offer you options. If you would rather stay here for a while, you are welcome to do that too. I just thought you might prefer a situation that felt more permanent. I do not want to be in your way. You are not in my way." Ezra set down his coffee cup and moved to sit on the log beside her, careful to leave space between them. "Let me be very clear. You can stay here as long as you need to. I will sleep in the tent. You can have the space by the fire. I will not touch you. I will not pressure you for anything, and I will not throw you out. You have my word on that." Eleanor looked at him, searching his face for signs of deception or ulterior motives, but all she saw was sincere concern and a quiet strength that made her feel safer than she had in years. "Why do you live alone in the mountains?" she asked, changing the subject. Ezra smiled slightly. "Because people are complicated and mountains are simple. Because I like the quiet. Because I can be myself out here without worrying about what society expects." He gestured at the surrounding wilderness. "Out here, your worth is not determined by your family name or how much money you have or whether you know the right people. It is determined by whether you can survive, whether you treat the land with respect, whether you keep your word. Those are things I understand. Do you ever get lonely?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I get lonely in towns too, so I figure I might as well be lonely somewhere beautiful." Eleanor found herself smiling despite everything. There was something refreshing about his honesty, the way he spoke without trying to impress or intimidate. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek bubbling nearby and the wind moving through the pine trees. Eleanor felt her body beginning to relax for the first time in days. The tension that she carried in her shoulders eased slightly. Her breathing deepened. "You look exhausted," Ezra observed. "When is the last time you slept properly?" Eleanor tried to remember and could not. Harold's drinking had kept her on edge for weeks, never knowing when he might stumble home and take his frustrations out on her. "The tent is yours if you want to rest," Ezra continued. "I need to check my trap lines anyway, so I will be gone for a few hours. Everything you need is in there, including blankets and a pillow. I do not want to take your bed." "Eleanor." Ezra's voice was patient but firm. "One of the things you are going to have to learn is that accepting help does not make you weak or indebted. It just makes you human. Now go rest. I will be back before dark." Too tired to argue further, Eleanor nodded. She stood on shaky legs and made her way to the tent. Inside, it was surprisingly spacious and organized. A bedroll was laid out neatly, covered with what looked like a bear pelt. A small trunk sat in one corner, and various supplies hung from the tent poles. Eleanor lay down on the bedroll, fully intending to just rest her eyes for a few minutes. Instead, she fell into the deepest sleep she had experienced in years. When she woke, the light filtering through the canvas had changed. Evening was approaching. Eleanor sat up quickly, disoriented and embarrassed. She had slept for hours. She emerged from the tent to find Ezra tending the fire. He had several rabbits skinned and ready to cook, along with what looked like wild greens. "Good, you are awake," he said with a smile. "I was starting to worry you might sleep through until morning. Feeling better?" Eleanor nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Her hair had come loose from its braid, and she probably looked a mess. "I'm sorry I slept so long." "Nothing to apologize for. Your body needed rest." Ezra began preparing the rabbits for cooking. "I hope you are hungry. I always catch more than I need." They ate as darkness settled over the camp. Ezra had strung up lanterns that cast a warm glow, and the fire crackled pleasantly. Eleanor found herself relaxing again, the combination of food, rest, and safety working its magic on her frayed nerves. "Can I ask you something?" Ezra said as they finished eating. "Of course." "What do you want, Eleanor? Not what you think you should want or what other people expect. What do you actually want for your life?" No one had ever asked her that question. Eleanor stared at the fire, thinking. "I want to feel safe," she said finally. "I want to wake up without being afraid. I want to do work that matters and be treated like I have value. I want to have choices." "Those are good wants," Ezra said. "All of them are possible. For someone like you, maybe. You are strong and capable. You can live however you choose. But I am just... You are just what? A woman who survived years of abuse? A woman brave enough to defend a stranger? A woman smart enough to know when to leave a bad situation?" Ezra leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Eleanor, I have known hardened trappers who would not have done what you did in that alley. You have more strength in you than you realize." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but years of Harold's voice in her head made it difficult. "You do not understand. I have nothing. No skills, no money, nowhere to go." "Then we will figure it out together." The words were simple, but the commitment behind them made Eleanor's breath catch. "You can stay here while you decide what you want to do next. I can teach you wilderness skills if you want to learn them. Or we can go talk to Mrs. Patterson about that boarding house job, or something else entirely. The point is, you have options now. You're not trapped anymore." That night, Eleanor lay in the tent while Ezra took his bedroll outside near the fire. She stared at the canvas ceiling, processing everything that had happened. A week ago, she had believed her life would continue in its miserable pattern until Harold either drank himself to death or killed her. Now she was lying in a mountain man's tent, full and safe, while he insisted she had value. It was too much to accept all at once, but for the first time in years, Eleanor allowed herself to feel a tiny spark of hope. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Ezra cooking breakfast over the fire. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "How did you sleep?" "Very well, thank you." Eleanor hesitated, then asked, "What can I do to help?" Ezra glanced up. "You do not have to earn your keep, Eleanor." "I know, but I would like to help anyway." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Can you make biscuits?" "Yes." "Then biscuits would be wonderful. Supplies are in that box over there." They worked together in comfortable silence, Eleanor mixing dough while Ezra tended the bacon and coffee. It felt strange and wonderful to be working alongside someone rather than serving them. When they sat down to eat, Eleanor found herself actually enjoying the meal rather than just consuming it for fuel. "I need to go into town today for supplies," Ezra said as they finished breakfast. "Would you like to come with me? We could talk to Mrs. Patterson if you want, or you could just see the town in daylight, get your bearings." Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse, to hide at the camp where Harold could not find her, but she forced herself to nod. "I would like that." They walked to Oroville together, Ezra shortening his long strides to match her pace. He kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the area. Eleanor found herself relaxing in his presence, the anxiety that usually plagued her fading into the background. When they reached town, several people greeted Ezra warmly. He was clearly respected here, though he lived on the outskirts of society. Eleanor noticed how he included her in conversations, introducing her simply as "my friend Eleanor," without any explanation or judgment. They stopped at the general store first. While Ezra discussed his supply order with the shopkeeper, Eleanor browsed the shelves. She had no money to buy anything, but it felt nice to look at fabrics and ribbons and small luxuries she never allowed herself to want. "See anything you like?" Ezra asked, appearing beside her. "Just looking," Eleanor said quickly. Ezra picked up a blue ribbon that Eleanor had been admiring. "This would look nice in your hair." Before Eleanor could protest, he had added it to his purchases. When she tried to object, he simply said, "It is a gift, Eleanor. Let me do something nice for you." After the general store, they walked to the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson was a stout woman in her 60s, with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Eleanor over carefully when Ezra made the introduction. "So you are looking for work?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Yes, madam," Eleanor said. "I can cook and clean and do laundry. I'm a hard worker." "I am sure you are." Mrs. Patterson glanced at Ezra. "You are vouching for her character?" "Absolutely," Ezra said without hesitation. Mrs. Patterson nodded slowly. "I could use someone to help with the morning meals and cleaning, room and board plus a small wage. Does that interest you?" Eleanor felt a mix of emotions. This was exactly what she had asked for, a practical solution to her situation. But the thought of leaving Ezra's camp, of not seeing him every day, left her with an unexpected, hollow feeling. "Could I have a day to think about it?" Eleanor heard herself ask. "Of course. Come by tomorrow if you decide you want the position." Mrs. Patterson smiled slightly. "For what it is worth, Ezra Quinn does not vouch for people lightly. If he says you are good people, then you are." On the walk back to camp, Ezra was quiet. Finally, he said, "That's a good opportunity. Mrs. Patterson runs a respectable establishment." "I know." Eleanor twisted the blue ribbon around her fingers. "Thank you for introducing me. But you are not sure you want to take it." "It was not a question." Eleanor sighed. "I do not know what I want. A week ago, I wanted safety and security. Now I have a chance at both, and I'm hesitating." "Why?" Eleanor could not articulate the reason. How could she explain that something about being at his camp felt right in a way that a practical boarding house job did not? How could she say that his presence made her feel more alive than she had in years? "I think I just need more time to adjust," she said finally. "Everything has changed so quickly." Ezra accepted this without pushing. Take all the time you need. The offer is not going anywhere. Over the next week, Eleanor settled into a routine at Ezra's camp. She insisted on contributing, so he taught her how to maintain the fire, how to identify edible plants, how to prepare game for cooking. Eleanor discovered she enjoyed learning these skills. There was something empowering about understanding how to take care of herself in the wilderness. More than that, she enjoyed spending time with Ezra. He was patient and encouraging as a teacher, never making her feel stupid for not knowing something. He told her stories about his years in the mountains, about close calls with bears and winters so harsh they could kill an unprepared person. But he also talked about moments of beauty, sunrises over snow-covered peaks, the sound of elk bugling in autumn, the perfect solitude of a mountain lake. Eleanor found herself opening up to him in return. She told him about her mother, about the years before Harold when life had been hard but bearable. She even told him about her dreams of having a family someday, though she immediately felt foolish for sharing something so personal. That's a good dream, Ezra said seriously. Everyone deserves love and family. Even you, Eleanor asked. Do you want those things? Ezra was quiet for a long moment. I used to think I was too set in my ways for that kind of life, too rough around the edges. But lately, he glanced at Eleanor, then away. Lately I've been reconsidering. The tension between them was shifting, Eleanor realized. What had started as simple kindness was becoming something else, something that made her heart race when he smiled at her and made her hyper-aware of his presence. One evening, they were sitting by the fire after dinner when Ezra suddenly said, "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her stomach clenched. Here it was, whatever catch had been lurking beneath his kindness. "What is it?" "I like having you here." The words came out in a rush. "More than I probably should. You make me laugh and you are smart and brave, and I look forward to seeing you every morning. I know that probably makes you uncomfortable, and I do not expect anything from you. But I wanted to be honest." Eleanor stared at him, her mind racing. A man was telling her he liked her company. Not that she was useful, not that she was tolerable, but that he enjoyed being with her, that her presence brought him happiness. "You do not have to say anything," Ezra continued, misreading her silence. "I just wanted you to know. It does not change anything about you staying here or the offer from Mrs. Patterson or anything else." "Ezra," Eleanor's voice came out as barely a whisper. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." He looked at her with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "Then everyone else has been a fool." "I like being here too," Eleanor admitted. "I like talking to you and learning from you. I like how safe I feel. I like—" She trailed off, not quite brave enough to finish the thought. "You like what?" Ezra prompted gently. "I like you." The words felt enormous, terrifying. "But I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to be around someone who is kind. I keep waiting for it to turn into something else." "It will not," Ezra said firmly. "Eleanor, I cannot promise you that I will never make mistakes or say the wrong thing. But I can promise that I will never hurt you deliberately. I will never use my strength against you. I will never make you feel small or worthless. Those are promises I can keep." Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "How do you know what to say?" "I do not. I'm just telling you the truth." Ezra reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You deserve someone who tells you the truth, Eleanor, who sees how remarkable you are." That night marked a turning point. Eleanor stopped sleeping in the tent and started sleeping by the fire, her bedroll placed near Ezra's, but not too close. They stayed up late talking, learning more about each other. Ezra told her about growing up in Montana, about his 3 brothers who had all become farmers like their father. Eleanor told him about her childhood before her mother married Harold, about better times when things had been simpler. The physical distance between them began to shrink. Not dramatically, not inappropriately, but in small ways. Ezra's hand on her shoulder when he taught her to shoot a rifle. Eleanor's fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee, sitting close enough that their shoulders touched as they watched the fire. 2 weeks after Eleanor arrived at his camp, Ezra asked, "Have you thought any more about the boarding house?" Eleanor had been dreading this conversation. "I do not think I want that job." "No? No." She took a deep breath. "I want to stay here, if that's still all right." Ezra's face broke into a wide smile. More than all right. But people will talk, Eleanor said, about a woman living at your camp. Let them talk, unless it bothers you. Eleanor thought about it. Did she care what the people of Oroville thought? Most of them had ignored her existence when she lived with Harold. They had not noticed or cared about her suffering. Why should their opinions matter now? No, she said slowly. I do not think it does. Good, because I have an idea. Over the next few days, Ezra began building a second shelter near his tent. Eleanor helped, learning how to construct a simple but sturdy framework and stretch canvas over it. When they finished, she had her own private space, separate from Ezra's tent but close enough that she still felt safe. This way, no one can say anything improper is happening, Ezra explained, but you still have a place here. Eleanor loved her new shelter. It was small but cozy, and it represented something important, a space that was truly hers. Ezra even made her a simple furniture, a small table, a stool, a frame to stretch animal hides for tanning. As spring turned toward summer, Eleanor began to truly thrive. The constant fear that had been her companion for years faded away. She ate regularly and put on healthy weight. The dark circles under her eyes disappeared. She learned dozens of wilderness skills, discovering that she had a natural talent for tracking and identifying plants. But more than the physical changes, Eleanor felt herself changing internally. Without Harold's constant criticism poisoning her thoughts, she began to see herself differently. She was capable. She was intelligent. She was worthy of kindness and respect. And she was falling in love with Ezra Quinn. It was impossible not to. He was everything she had never known a man could be, gentle and strong, patient and decisive, protective without being controlling. He treated her like an equal partner rather than a subordinate. He asked her opinions and listened to her ideas. When she made mistakes, he helped her learn from them without making her feel stupid. He was also devastatingly attractive, though Eleanor tried not to think about that too much. But it was hard to ignore when she watched him chop wood, muscles flexing beneath his shirt, or when he came back from bathing in the creek with his hair wet and slicked back, or when he looked at her with those remarkable blue-green eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. She thought perhaps he felt the same way. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her stomach flutter. He found excuses to be near her, to touch her in small, innocent ways. The air between them felt charged with possibility, but neither of them said anything. Eleanor was too inexperienced and uncertain. Ezra seemed to be waiting for something, though she was not sure what. The situation came to a head on a warm evening in late June. They had been to town for supplies, and on the way back they had run into Harold. Eleanor had frozen at the sight of him, all her old fears rushing back. Harold had looked her over with contempt. "So here is where you have been hiding," he said, "with this mountain trash." Ezra had gone very still beside her, but his voice remained calm. "Eleanor is free to be wherever she chooses." "She is a whore living in sin with a man who is not her husband," Harold spat. "Everyone in town knows it." "Watch your mouth," Ezra said, his tone dropping to something dangerous. "Or what? You will shoot me like you shoot animals?" Harold stepped closer, emboldened by drink. "That girl has been nothing but trouble since her mother dragged her into my life. She is lazy and worthless, and if you have any sense, you will send her back where she belongs." Eleanor felt the words hit her like physical blows. She had been doing so well, building herself back up, but Harold's voice unleashed all her old insecurities. "Eleanor does not belong anywhere near you," Ezra said coldly. "And if I ever hear you speak about her that way again, we will have a serious problem. Now get out of my sight." Something in Ezra's demeanor must have penetrated Harold's drunken haze, because he backed away, but not before shooting Eleanor one last venomous look. "You will come crawling back eventually. You always do." The walk back to camp was silent. Eleanor felt like she was drowning in shame and self-doubt. All of Harold's old criticisms played in her head on repeat. Lazy, worthless, nothing. When they reached camp, Eleanor went straight to her shelter and sat down, trying to steady her breathing. Ezra appeared in the doorway. "Eleanor." "I am fine," she said automatically. "No, you are not." He crouched down in front of her. "Talk to me." "What is there to say? He's right about everything. I am living here improperly. People probably do think I am exactly what he called me, and I'm worthless. I contribute nothing. You would be better off without me." "Stop." Ezra's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. "Eleanor, look at me." She raised her eyes to his face. "Harold is a bitter, cruel man who needs to tear others down to feel big. Nothing he said was true. Do you understand? Nothing." "You cannot know that." "Yes, I can, because I see you every day. I see how hard you work, how much you have learned, how brave you are. I see your kindness and your strength." Ezra took her hands in his. "Eleanor, you are not worthless. You are extraordinary, and I am not better off without you. I am better with you. You are just saying that to make me feel better. I am saying it because it is true." Ezra's grip on her hands tightened. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you? I see the woman who stood up to a drunk twice her size to protect a stranger. I see the woman who had the courage to leave an abusive situation with nothing but the clothes on her back. I see the woman who learns a new skill and then practices until she masters it. I see someone beautiful and strong and worthy of every good thing this life has to offer." Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "I do not know how to believe that." "Then let me believe it for both of us until you can believe it yourself." Ezra pulled her forward gently, wrapping his arms around her. Eleanor stiffened at first, unused to being held, then slowly relaxed into the embrace. He was so warm and solid, and she felt safer in his arms than she had anywhere else. They stayed like that for a long time, Ezra holding her while she cried out years of accumulated pain and fear. When her tears finally slowed, she pulled back slightly to look at him. "Thank you," she whispered. "Always," Ezra said. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Eleanor's breath caught. "What?" "I love you," Ezra repeated. "I've been trying to find the right time to say it, but there's never going to be a perfect moment. So I'm just telling you now. I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you laugh when you are surprised. I love watching you learn new things. I love who I am when I'm with you. I love you, Eleanor Zimmerman." Eleanor felt like her heart might burst. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out. "I have for weeks now. I just did not know how to say it. I did not think someone like you could love someone like me." "Someone like me?" Ezra smiled. "You mean a rough mountain man with questionable social skills who lives in the woods?" "Despite everything," Eleanor laughed, "someone kind and strong and patient, someone who sees good in me when I cannot see it myself." "Then we are even," Ezra said softly, "because you make me want to be better. You make me believe in the kind of life I thought I could never have." He leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. When she actually leaned toward him, he kissed her gently. It was Eleanor's first kiss, and it was everything she had never known to hope for, tender and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Ezra rested his forehead against hers. "We will do this properly," he said. "I will court you properly, and when the time is right, if you will have me, I would like to marry you." "Yes," Eleanor said without hesitation, "yes to all of it." They sat together in her shelter, wrapped in each other's arms as darkness fell around them. Eleanor felt like she had crossed some invisible threshold into a new life, one where she was loved and valued and safe. The next morning, Ezra made good on his promise to court Eleanor properly. He might live in the wilderness, but he understood the importance of doing things right. Over breakfast, he announced his intention to build a proper cabin before winter. "If we are going to do this," he said, "you deserve a real home, not just a tent and a canvas shelter." "I do not need anything fancy," Eleanor protested. "Maybe not, but I want to build you something that will last, something that is ours together." Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest at the word ours. "Then I want to help build it." Over the following weeks, they selected a site near the creek and began work on the cabin. Ezra had built structures before and knew what he was doing. Eleanor proved to be a quick study, learning how to notch logs and mix mortar. It was hard work, physically demanding in ways she had never experienced, but it was also deeply satisfying. They worked side by side every day, and the cabin began to take shape. It would be modest by most standards, but substantial by wilderness standards. One large room with a fireplace, a loft for sleeping, and space enough for a growing family someday. That thought made Eleanor blush every time it crossed her mind. A family, children, a life with Ezra. They continued their courtship with all the sweetness of new love. Ezra brought her wildflowers he found on his traplines. Eleanor learned to cook his favorite meals. They took long walks together, and Ezra showed her parts of the mountains he loved. They talked endlessly about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. And they kissed, often and with increasing passion, though Ezra was always careful not to push too far. "When we get married," he said firmly one evening when Eleanor had wanted to keep going, "I will not dishonor you by moving too fast." His respect for her only made Eleanor love him more. As summer progressed, the cabin neared completion. It was rustic but beautiful, a testament to their combined efforts. Eleanor could not wait to make it a true home. They had been so focused on building that they had not been to town in weeks. So when Ezra suggested they go for supplies and to make some announcements, Eleanor agreed readily. The trip to Oroville was pleasant. Eleanor no longer felt fear walking through the streets. She was with Ezra, and more than that, she had changed. She walked taller now, met people's eyes, spoke with confidence. Their first stop was the church. Reverend Matthews greeted them warmly. "Mr. Quinn, Miss Zimmerman, what brings you by?" "We would like to arrange a wedding," Ezra said, his hand finding Eleanor's. "As soon as possible, if you are available." Reverend Matthews' face broke into a smile. "I would be honored. When were you thinking?" 2 weeks from now?" Ezra looked at Eleanor for confirmation. "That gives us time to finish the cabin and make preparations." "Perfect," Eleanor agreed. They settled the details, then continued through town. Ezra wanted to order a few things from the general store: glass for windows, a proper stove, nails and tools. While he discussed his order with the shopkeeper, Eleanor browsed the fabric selection. "Planning a wedding dress?" a voice asked. Eleanor turned to find Mrs. Patterson smiling at her. "I am, actually." "Congratulations, dear. I heard Ezra Quinn finally convinced someone to put up with him." The older woman's eyes twinkled with good humor. "He is a good man. You chose well." "Thank you." Eleanor hesitated, then asked, "Mrs. Patterson, could you recommend a seamstress? I need a dress made, but I do not have much money." "Nonsense, I will make your dress. Consider it a wedding gift." Before Eleanor could protest, Mrs. Patterson continued, "I insist. You helped me see that I needed to hire more help around the boarding house, even if you did not take the position yourself. Let me do this for you." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. Such kindness from someone who barely knew her. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They spent the next hour selecting fabric and discussing design. Eleanor chose a simple but elegant style in a soft cream color. Mrs. Patterson took her measurements and promised to have it ready with time to spare. When Eleanor rejoined Ezra, she was glowing with happiness. He took one look at her face and pulled her into a quick embrace, uncaring of who might see. "What is you so happy?" he asked. "Everything," Eleanor said simply. "Absolutely everything." They walked home hand in hand, making plans for the wedding and the life that would follow. It would be a small ceremony, just a few people from town who had shown them kindness. But it would be real and binding, the start of their life together. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. They finished the cabin, and Eleanor worked to make it comfortable. She sewed curtains from fabric scraps and made a quilt for their bed. Ezra built furniture, a proper bed frame, a table, chairs, shelves. He also installed the glass windows in the stove, transforming the space from a rough cabin into a cozy home. Eleanor marveled at it all. This place was hers, not something she was borrowing or occupying on sufferance, but truly hers. Theirs. The day before the wedding, Mrs. Patterson brought the finished dress to the cabin. Eleanor tried it on and could barely recognize herself in the mirror Ezra had acquired. The woman looking back at her was healthy and happy, with clear eyes and rosy cheeks. She looked loved. "You are beautiful," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice catching with emotion. "Ezra is a lucky man." "I think I am the lucky one," Eleanor replied. That night, Eleanor stayed in her original shelter one last time while Ezra remained in the cabin. It felt strange to be separated after spending so many weeks working side by side, but they both wanted to honor tradition. Eleanor lay awake for a long time, thinking about how much her life had changed. 4 months ago, she'd been living in fear and despair. Now, she was about to marry a man she loved beyond measure, a man who had taught her what kindness looked like. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Eleanor dressed carefully in her new gown, her hands trembling slightly with nerves and excitement. She had never attended a wedding, let alone been a bride. But when she walked to the church and saw Ezra waiting for her, all her nervousness vanished. He looked magnificent in clean clothes with his hair and beard neatly trimmed, but it was his expression that took her breath away. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They spoke their vows before Reverend Matthews and a small gathering of witnesses. When Ezra said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure. When Eleanor repeated the words, she meant them with every fiber of her being. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Matthews said with a smile. Ezra pulled Eleanor close and kissed her thoroughly, to the applause and laughter of their guests. When they broke apart, they were both grinning. "Mrs. Quinn," Ezra said, testing out her new name. "Mr. Quinn," Eleanor replied, joy bubbling up in her chest. They had a small reception at the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson had prepared food, and several townspeople came to offer congratulations. Even a few of Ezra's fellow mountain men showed up, rough-looking characters who nonetheless treated Eleanor with surprising courtesy. As the sun began to set, Ezra and Eleanor slipped away from the celebration. They walked back to their cabin hand in hand, neither in any hurry. "How do you feel?" Ezra asked. "Like the luckiest woman alive," Eleanor said honestly. "How about you?" "Like I finally found what I was looking for." Ezra stopped walking and pulled her into his arms. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for building a life with me." "Thank you for teaching me what love is supposed to look like," Eleanor replied. She reached up and touched his face, marveling that she had the right to do so freely now. "Thank you for every kind word, every patient moment, every time you showed me I was worth more than I believed." They kissed again under the darkening sky, taking their time. When they finally reached the cabin, Ezra lifted Eleanor and carried her over the threshold, making her laugh with delight. Their wedding night was everything Eleanor could have hoped for. Ezra was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and loved every moment. He whispered words of devotion between kisses, telling her how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how lucky he felt. Eleanor discovered that intimacy, when shared with someone who truly cared for her well-being, was not something to fear, but something wonderful. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their bed, Eleanor's head resting on Ezra's chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. "Are you all right?" Ezra asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. "More than all right," Eleanor said. "I never knew it could be like this." "Like what?" "So full of love. So safe." She propped herself up to look at him. "You have given me everything, Ezra. A home, safety, respect. But most importantly, you taught me that I deserved all those things. You changed how I see myself." Ezra smiled and pulled her close again. "You did that yourself, Eleanor. I just reminded you of what was already there." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, both content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. The first months of marriage were a time of adjustment and joy. Eleanor and Ezra settled into a comfortable routine, dividing tasks and working together to maintain their home and prepare for winter. Eleanor continued learning wilderness skills, and Ezra learned to appreciate having a partner to share his life with. They discovered the rhythms of married life together. Eleanor learned that Ezra was grumpy before his morning coffee, and that he sang when he thought no one was listening. Ezra learned that Eleanor was ticklish along her ribs and that she cried at beautiful sunsets. They learned how to navigate disagreements with respect and patience. They learned to communicate their needs and support each other's dreams. But most of all, they learned to simply be happy together. As autumn approached, Eleanor began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Ezra, barely able to contain her excitement. When she finally shared the news one evening over dinner, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "Are you certain?" he asked, his face breaking into a huge smile. "As certain as I can be." Eleanor felt nervous suddenly. "Are you happy?" Ezra stood up and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "Happy?" "Eleanor, I am beyond happy. A baby. Our baby." He set her down carefully, as if she might break, and immediately began fussing over her. "You should sit down. Are you feeling all right? Do you need anything? We should ride into town and see the doctor." Eleanor laughed at his sudden protectiveness. "Ezra, I am fine. Women have babies all the time. I do not need to be wrapped in cotton." "I know, but," he ran a hand through his hair, "I want to make sure you have everything you need, that you are safe and healthy." His concern was touching, if slightly overwhelming. Over the following months, Ezra became even more attentive than usual. He took over the heavier chores, made sure Eleanor ate well, and worried constantly about her well-being. Eleanor found it endearing, even when it bordered on excessive. This was what it meant to be loved, she realized, to have someone care so deeply about your welfare that they could not help but show it constantly. As winter settled over the mountains, Eleanor's belly grew. She and Ezra spent long evenings by the fire, making plans for their growing family. They discussed names and argued playfully about who the baby would look like. Ezra began carving a cradle from pine wood, his large hands surprisingly deft at the detailed work. "Do you think I will be a good father?" he asked one evening, sanding the cradle smooth. "The best," Eleanor said without hesitation. "You are patient and kind and strong. Our child will be lucky to have you." "I want to be different from my father," Ezra admitted. "I want our children to know they are loved, to hear it every day. I want them to feel safe expressing themselves, to know their opinions matter." "They will," Eleanor assured him. "We will make sure of it together." When spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and blooming wildflowers, Eleanor was nearly ready to deliver. Mrs. Patterson had agreed to come stay with them for the birth, bringing her experience and calm presence. The labor began early one morning in late April. Eleanor woke to contractions that steadily grew stronger. Ezra immediately rode to fetch Mrs. Patterson while Eleanor tried to stay calm. The labor was long and difficult. Eleanor had never experienced such pain, and there were moments when she wondered if she had the strength to continue. But Ezra stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement. "You can do this," he told her during a particularly difficult contraction. "You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer, love." Mrs. Patterson proved invaluable, guiding Eleanor through the process with calm authority. Finally, after hours of labor, a baby's cry filled the cabin. "It is a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the squalling infant in Eleanor's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Eleanor looked down at her son, overcome with emotion. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair, and his eyes squeezed shut as he cried. She glanced up at Ezra, who was staring at the baby with an expression of complete wonder. "A son," he whispered. "We have a son." "Would you like to hold him?" Eleanor asked. Ezra nodded, carefully taking the baby in his large hands. The infant looked tiny, cradled against his father's broad chest. Ezra stared down at him with such love and tenderness that Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one," Ezra said softly. "I am your father, and I promise you, I will always keep you safe. I will always love you. I will always tell you that you matter." Eleanor saw tears on Ezra's cheeks and loved him even more for not being afraid to show his emotion. They named the boy Elijah, meaning, "The Lord is my God." It felt appropriate for a child who represented such a blessing, such an unexpected gift. The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting, but wonderful. Elijah proved to have a good temperament, crying only when he needed something. Ezra was a devoted father from the start, taking turns with night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just holding his son. Eleanor watched her husband with their child and marveled at how full her heart felt. She had gone from a life of fear and loneliness to this, a loving husband, a beautiful baby, a home filled with warmth and laughter. One evening, as summer was beginning, Eleanor sat on the porch nursing Elijah while Ezra worked on repairs to the shed. She thought about her journey, about the woman she had been just a year ago, that Eleanor would not have believed this life was possible. Ezra finished his work and came to sit beside her, watching their son nurse with a soft smile. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different everything is now," Eleanor said. "A year ago I had never heard a kind word from a man. I did not think men were capable of kindness, and now I am married to the kindest man I have ever known, and we have a son who will grow up knowing what love looks like." Ezra put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Eleanor. I hope you know that now." "I do," Eleanor said, and she meant it. She finally believed, deep in her soul, that she was worthy of love, that she deserved kindness and respect and all the good things life had to offer. "I love you," Ezra said, kissing her temple. "I love you too," Eleanor replied. "Thank you for speaking kind until I knew that was normal. Thank you for showing me a different way to live." "Thank you for trusting me," Ezra said, "for taking a chance on a rough mountain man who did not know what he was looking for until he found you." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the mountains while their son dozed in Eleanor's arms. It was a simple moment, but it was perfect. As the years passed, Eleanor and Ezra's life continued to be full of love and growth. They had 3 more children, twin girls born 2 years after Elijah and another boy 3 years after that. Their cabin expanded with additions as their family grew. The once quiet wilderness camp became a lively home filled with children's laughter and joy. Ezra proved to be everything Eleanor had believed he would be as a father. He was patient with the children, teaching them wilderness skills just as he had taught Eleanor. He was affectionate, never hesitant to hug his children or tell them he loved them, and he was present, always making time for his family even when work demanded his attention. Eleanor blossomed into motherhood. She was nurturing and strong, teaching her children not just practical skills but important lessons about kindness, courage, and self-worth. She told them often that they were loved, that they mattered, that their feelings were valid. She made sure her daughters knew they were just as capable as their brothers, and that her sons understood the importance of treating everyone with respect. Their children grew up knowing only love and security. They had no concept of the cruelty that had marked Eleanor's early life, and she was grateful for that. She and Ezra had broken the cycle, creating something new and healthy for the next generation. Oroville slowly grew and changed around them. The rough frontier town gradually became more civilized, but Eleanor and Ezra's cabin remained a constant, a place where people knew they could find help and kindness. They took in travelers who needed shelter, helped neighbors in times of trouble, and became pillars of their small community. Eleanor sometimes encountered Harold in town, though those meetings became rarer as years passed. He had aged poorly, the drink and bitterness taking their toll. Eleanor felt no satisfaction in his decline, only a kind of distant pity. He had been given the opportunity to show kindness and had chosen cruelty instead. She had been given the same choice in how she raised her own children, and she had chosen differently. The last time she saw Harold, he was sitting outside the saloon, looking old and worn. Their eyes met briefly, and Eleanor saw something flicker in his expression. Regret, perhaps? Or just the confusion of a man who could not understand how the worthless girl he had tormented had built such a beautiful life. Eleanor did not stop to speak to him. There was nothing to say. She simply nodded in acknowledgement and continued walking, her hand in Ezra's, their children trailing behind them like a line of ducklings. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, Eleanor thought about forgiveness. She was not sure she had entirely forgiven Harold for the years of abuse, but she had let go of the anger and pain he had caused. She had refused to let his cruelty define her or limit her capacity for joy. "You are quiet tonight," Ezra observed, pulling her closer. "Everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," Eleanor said. "I was just thinking about how far we have come, how much life has changed. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." Eleanor tilted her head to look at him. Even after years of marriage, her heart still skipped when she saw him. His hair was starting to show threads of silver now, and there were lines around his eyes from years of smiling, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Do you ever regret marrying me? Taking on a wife and family when you were used to living alone?" Ezra looked genuinely shocked. "Regret? Eleanor, you and our children are the best thing that ever happened to me. My life was empty before you. I just did not realize how empty until you filled it with love and light and purpose. Even when the children are being impossible and the cabin is loud and messy?" "Especially then," Ezra said firmly. "I love the noise and the mess because it means I'm not alone anymore. It means I have a family, people who need me and love me. Do you know how precious that is?" Eleanor did know. She understood exactly what he meant because she felt the same way. "I love you," she said. "I will never stop being grateful that you walked into that alley when you did." "I love you too," Ezra replied, "and I will never stop being grateful that you were brave enough to give me a chance." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had every night since their wedding. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees, and the creek bubbled over stones. Inside, their children slept soundly in their beds, safe and loved. 10 years after their wedding, Eleanor stood in front of their cabin watching the sunset. Elijah was 12 now, already showing signs of his father's height and strength. The twins were 10, clever and adventurous girls who kept their parents on their toes. And little Samuel was 7, the quietest of the 4, but perhaps the most observant. Ezra came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Beautiful evening." "Beautiful life," Eleanor corrected. "That too." Ezra was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you remember what you told me once, about wanting to feel safe and valued and have choices?" "I remember." "Did we manage that? Did I give you what you wanted?" Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "Ezra Quinn, you gave me everything. But more importantly, you taught me that I could give those things to myself. You showed me I was strong enough to build the life I wanted. You never tried to rescue me or fix me. You just loved me and believed in me until I could believe in myself." Ezra smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart flutter. "You did the same for me, you know. I was existing, not living. You taught me what it meant to truly be alive, to be part of something bigger than myself." Their children burst out of the cabin at that moment, Elijah chasing the twins while Samuel tried to referee. The peaceful moment was shattered by laughter and shouting and the chaos of a young family. Eleanor and Ezra looked at each other and laughed. This was their life, messy and loud and full of love. It was not perfect because perfection was impossible, but it was real and good and theirs. As the children ran around the clearing, burning off energy before bedtime, Ezra pulled Eleanor close and kissed her forehead. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." "Thank you," Eleanor echoed, "for speaking kind until I knew that was normal, for showing me what love is supposed to look like, for building this life with me." They stood together in the fading light, watching their children play, secure in the knowledge that they had created something beautiful and lasting. Eleanor thought about the scared, broken young woman she had been, and felt only compassion for her. That woman had survived impossible circumstances and had found the courage to hope for something better. And she had found it in the form of a mountain man with kind eyes and a gentle heart who had seen her worth when she could not see it herself. As darkness fell and they called the children inside for the night, Eleanor felt profound gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for Ezra's kindness, for the family they had built, for the home they had created. But most of all, gratitude for the journey that had led her here, to this moment, to this life. Later that night, after the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Eleanor and Ezra lay in bed talking softly. This was their time, these peaceful moments at the end of busy days when they could reconnect and simply be together. "Elijah asked me today what I wanted to be when I grew up," Ezra said with amusement. "He forgot that I am already grown." Eleanor laughed. "What did you tell him?" "That I already am what I want to be, a husband, a father, a man who lives on his own terms." He seemed satisfied with that answer. Ezra paused. "What would you have said if someone had asked you that question when you were young?" Eleanor thought about it. "I do not think anyone ever did ask me. But if they had, I probably would not have known how to answer. I did not dare dream that far ahead. And now? Now I would say that I want to be exactly what I am. Your wife, our children's mother, a woman who survived and thrived and built a life worth living." Eleanor snuggled closer to Ezra. "I would say that I want to be someone who shows the same kindness to others that was shown to me, someone who helps people see their own worth." "You already do that," Ezra assured her. "The children adore you. Our neighbors respect you. You have become a force for good in this community." Eleanor felt pride at his words. She had come so far from the frightened girl who could barely look people in the eye. She had built a life of purpose and meaning. The years continued to pass peacefully. Their children grew into fine young people, each with their own unique personality and gifts. Elijah became a skilled tracker and hunter like his father, but he also inherited his mother's compassion. The twins, Mary and Martha, were inseparable and fearless, already talking about traveling to see more of the country when they were older. Samuel showed an aptitude for learning and spent hours with books when he could get them. Eleanor and Ezra grew older together gracefully. There were hardships over the years, as there always are in life: harsh winters, lean times, illnesses, and injuries. But they faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each challenge they overcame. When Elijah turned 18, he began courting a young woman from town, a sweet girl named Rebecca, who treated him with genuine affection. Eleanor watched her son fall in love and felt her heart swell with happiness. This was what she had hoped for when raising her children, that they would know how to recognize and appreciate real love when they found it. "He reminds me of us," Ezra said one evening, watching Elijah walk Rebecca home after dinner. "How so?" "The way he looks at her, like she hung the moon and stars. That is how I still look at you, you know." Eleanor turned to her husband, this man who had given her everything, and smiled. "I know, and I look at you the same way. After all these years, I'm still amazed that I get to love you and be loved by you." "I hope all our children find what we have," Ezra said. "I hope they find partners who treat them with kindness and respect, who see their worth and help them become their best selves." "They will," Eleanor said confidently, "because we taught them what to look for. We showed them what real love looks like." As the sun set on another day, Eleanor reflected on her journey. She had started with nothing, believing she was worth nothing. But through Ezra's patience and kindness, she had discovered her own strength and value. She had built a family, raised children, created a home. She had transformed from victim to survivor to someone who thrived. And through it all, Ezra had been there, not controlling or dictating, but supporting and encouraging. He had given her space to grow while always being there to catch her if she fell. He had loved her unconditionally, even when she struggled to love herself. That night, as they lay in bed with moonlight streaming through the window, Eleanor said something she had been thinking about for a while. "Ezra, I want to help other women in situations like I was in. I want them to know there is a way out, that they deserve better." Ezra was quiet for a moment, considering. "How would you do that?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe we could offer shelter here, at least temporarily. Or I could volunteer with the church to help families in need. I just feel like I need to give back, to help others the way you helped me." "I think that's a wonderful idea," Ezra said, "and I will support you however I can." Over the following months, Eleanor began quietly letting it be known that their home was a safe place for women and children in trouble. She worked with Reverend Matthews and Mrs. Patterson to create a network of support in Oroville. It started small, just a few women seeking advice or temporary shelter. But word spread, and soon Eleanor was known as someone who would help without judgment. She used her own experiences to guide others, showing them that they could rebuild their lives. She offered practical assistance alongside emotional support, and most importantly, she treated everyone who came to her with dignity and respect, helping them see their own worth. Ezra was proud of her work and helped however he could. He taught skills to women who needed to learn self-sufficiency. He intimidated men who tried to reclaim wives or daughters who had fled abuse. He provided resources from his own supplies without hesitation. Together, they made a real difference in their community. Lives were changed, cycles of abuse were broken, and hope was restored. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ezra surprised Eleanor with a trip into the mountains. They left the children, who were old enough now to manage on their own for a few days, and rode up into the high country. Ezra led Eleanor to a beautiful meadow surrounded by peaks with a crystal-clear lake reflecting the sky. They made camp and spent 2 days doing nothing but enjoying each other's company, away from the demands of family and community. "This is where I came when I needed to think," Ezra told her as they sat by the lake watching stars emerge. "Before I met you, I would come up here and wonder if I would spend my whole life alone, if I would ever find someone who understood me." "And now?" Eleanor asked. "Now I know how lucky I am. I found not just someone who understands me, but someone who makes me better, someone who gave my life purpose and meaning." Ezra took her hand. 20 years, Eleanor. 20 years of waking up next to you, of building a life together, of loving you more each day. I would not change a single moment. Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. Even the hard moments, the fights and the struggles. Especially those, Ezra said, because we came through them together. We learned and grew. That is what marriage is, I think. Not just the joy, but working through difficulties side by side. They made love under the stars that night, with the same passion and tenderness they had shared on their wedding night. 20 years had not diminished their desire for each other. If anything, the deep knowledge they had of each other only made their connection stronger. The next morning, as they packed up camp to head home, Ezra pulled something from his saddlebag. It was a small wooden box intricately carved. "I made this for you," he said, handing it to Eleanor. "Happy anniversary." Eleanor opened the box to find a delicate silver necklace with a small pendant. The pendant was engraved with a mountain and a star. "The mountain represents where we built our life," Ezra explained, "and the star represents hope. You gave me hope, Eleanor. You made me believe in something better." "You gave me the same thing," Eleanor said, fastening the necklace around her neck. "You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me a different way to live." They rode home slowly, in no hurry to return to reality. When they finally arrived back at the cabin, their children greeted them with hugs and stories of everything that had happened while they were gone. Life continued in its beautiful, messy way. The children grew up and began making their own paths. Elijah married Rebecca and built his own cabin nearby. The twins headed east to see more of the country, writing long letters about their adventures. Samuel surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, dedicated to educating children in rural communities. Eleanor and Ezra became grandparents, delighting in the next generation. They watched their children parent with the same love and respect they had tried to model, and felt proud of what they had created. As they grew older, their love only deepened. The passion of youth mellowed into something even more beautiful, a partnership built on decades of shared experiences, of supporting each other through joys and sorrows, of choosing each other every single day. On a warm evening in late summer, when they were both in their 60s, Eleanor and Ezra sat on their porch watching the sunset. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, supervised by Elijah and Rebecca. The sounds of laughter and life filled the air. "Do you remember what you asked me that first day?" Eleanor said. "You asked if I was hurt." "I remember," Ezra said. "No one had ever asked me that before. No one had cared enough to ask, and in that moment, something shifted inside me. I started to believe that maybe kindness was possible, that maybe I deserved it." Ezra squeezed her hand. "You did deserve it. You always did. I know that now, but I did not know it then. You taught me, Ezra. With every kind word, every patient moment, every time you chose gentleness over harshness, you taught me that kindness was normal, that it was what I should expect, not just from others, but from myself." "You taught me things too," Ezra said. "You taught me that opening my heart to another person was worth the risk, that family and connection mattered more than isolation and self-sufficiency. You made me a better man, Eleanor." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching their legacy of love play out before them in the form of children and grandchildren who knew nothing but security and affection. "If you could go back and tell that scared young woman in the alley anything," Ezra asked, "what would you say?" Eleanor thought carefully before answering. "I would tell her to hold on. That help is coming. That she is stronger than she knows, and that the life she is afraid to dream about is waiting for her. I would tell her that she deserves every good thing that is coming her way." "And what would you tell the mountain man about to intervene?" Ezra asked with a smile. "I would tell him to trust his instincts, that the choice to help a stranger will change his life in the most beautiful ways, that he is about to meet the woman who will make him understand what love really means." Eleanor leaned her head on Ezra's shoulder. "I would tell him that speaking kind words to a frightened woman will start a ripple effect that changes not just 2 lives, but generations to come." As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eleanor Quinn felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the journey that had led her here, for the man beside her, for the family they had created together. She had learned that kindness was not a weakness, but a strength. That love, real love, meant seeing someone's worth and helping them see it too. That the words we speak and the way we treat others have profound impacts that echo far beyond what we can imagine. Ezra had spoken kind until she knew that was normal, and in doing so, he had given her not just a life, but the tools to help others find their own worth. Together, they had broken cycles of abuse and created cycles of love instead. As darkness fell and they called their family inside for dinner, Eleanor looked at Ezra one more time. His hair was silver now, his face lined with age, but his eyes still held that same kindness that had first captured her attention all those years ago. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Ezra replied. "Today, tomorrow, always." And Eleanor knew, deep in her soul, that this was her happily ever after. Not because life had been perfect or easy, but because she had found someone who chose kindness every day, someone who had shown her what she deserved and helped her believe she was worthy of receiving it. In a world that could be harsh and cruel, they had created a pocket of love and safety. They had raised children who knew how to be kind. They had helped others find their way out of darkness. They had built a legacy that would outlast them both. As they gathered around the table with their family, sharing food and stories and laughter, Eleanor sent up a silent prayer of thanks. For second chances, for mountain men with gentle hearts, for the power of kindness to transform lives, and for love that started with simple words spoken to a frightened woman in an alley and grew into something that changed the world, one kind word at a time. Years later, when Eleanor and Ezra were both old and gray, they still held hands as they sat on their porch. Their children were grown with families of their own. Their grandchildren were having children. The legacy they had built continued to grow and flourish. One day, a young woman came to their door. She was thin and scared, with bruises poorly hidden beneath her sleeves. Eleanor recognized the look in her eyes immediately. It was the same look she had seen in her own reflection so many years ago. "I heard you help women," the young woman said quietly, "that you offer shelter and guidance to those who need it." Eleanor smiled warmly and opened the door wider. "You heard correctly. Come in. You are safe here." As the woman stepped inside, Eleanor caught Ezra's eye. He nodded with understanding and approval. Even after all these years, they were still helping people find their way to safety and self-worth. That evening, after they had settled the young woman in their guest room with reassurances that she could stay as long as she needed, Eleanor and Ezra returned to their porch. "We are still doing it," Ezra observed, "still helping people find their way." "Because we know how important it is," Eleanor said. "We know what difference one kind word can make. One offered hand. One safe place." Ezra pulled her close, and they watched the sunset together as they had done thousands of times before. Each sunset was different, yet each was beautiful in its own way, much like the days of their life together. "No regrets?" Ezra asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one," Eleanor confirmed. "You gave me everything I needed to become who I was meant to be, and I like to think I did the same for you." "You did," Ezra assured her. "You absolutely did." They sat in peaceful contentment as the stars began to emerge one by one, like tiny promises scattered across the sky. Promises of hope and possibility, promises that tomorrow would come, bringing new chances to love and be kind. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that terrifying moment in an alley to this peaceful evening surrounded by love. Every kind word Ezra had spoken had been a step on that journey. Every patient moment had been another brick in the foundation of her healing. She had learned that love was not supposed to hurt, that respect was not something to be earned, but something everyone deserved. That kindness should be the default, not the exception. And she had learned that she was worthy of all these things. As they finally stood to go inside for the night, Eleanor paused and looked back at the mountains, silhouetted against the starry sky. Somewhere out there, the young woman in their guest room was perhaps experiencing her first full night of peaceful sleep in months or years. Tomorrow, Eleanor would begin the process of helping her see her own worth, just as Ezra had once helped Eleanor see hers. The cycle would continue. Kindness would beget kindness, love would multiply and spread, and lives would be changed, one gentle word at a time. "Ready for bed?" Ezra asked, holding out his hand. Eleanor took it, marveling as always at how his touch still brought her comfort and joy after so many years. "Ready?" she said. They walked inside together, closing the door on another beautiful day and opening themselves to whatever tomorrow might bring. Together, they had built something that would last far beyond their own lives, a legacy of love, of kindness, of showing others that they deserved better than cruelty and fear. Eleanor Quinn fell asleep that night as she had every night for decades, safe in her husband's arms, secure in the knowledge that she was loved, and grateful beyond measure for the mountain man who had spoken kind until she knew that was normal. And in knowing that kindness was normal, she had learned to expect it, to give it, and to help others understand that they deserved it too. This was the greatest gift Ezra had given her, and the greatest gift they had given together to everyone whose lives they touched. Their story was one of transformation and hope, of love conquering fear, of kindness changing everything. It was a story that would be told to their great-grandchildren and beyond, a reminder that one person choosing compassion over cruelty could change not just one life but countless lives. As the moon rose over the California mountains and cast its silver light across the land, the Quinn cabin stood as a testament to what was possible when two people chose love. When a man chose to speak kindly and a woman chose to believe those kind words could be true. When both chose, every single day, to build something beautiful together. This was their happily ever after, not perfect but real, not easy but worth it, not fairy tale magic, but the deeper magic of two people committed to loving each other and spreading that love to everyone around them. And it all started with a simple question asked with genuine concern. Are you hurt? Those 3 words had changed everything. They had been the first kind words Eleanor Zimmerman had heard from a man. They had been the beginning of a journey that led her from fear to love, from worthlessness to worth, from despair to hope. Ezra Quinn had spoken kind until she knew that was normal, and in doing so, he had given her the world.